Hey guys, this is Allison from Alley Cat Creations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And if you get anything from my work, I might drop a new author to read, a new book to explore. Please consider supporting my work, and all the links will be linked below the video. And I thank you for your patience and gratitude and blessings. So I went to record a video of Blavatsky last night, and I already read that part because I left it in my notes. I didn't refresh my sticky. Yeah, so I already did that video and really kicking my ass for that because I was so like, yes, I get this. And no, it didn't. No, I already read it, dumbass. I'm a dumbass. So just to the last video I did was just a little chit chat what was going on. So like I froze, like I paused my video. I had a tsunami coming out of my bathroom. That's what I paused for. Like a tsunami of a backup. So the last couple of weeks have been really rough with maintaining taking showers and using water because of I need a lot of work done to the house. I had tree trimmers here the other day. My trees are completely trimmed. It took all day. They look fantastic. The drain though has a lot of tree roots or roots inside them. I never seen this stuff before. We don't have that problem in New York as much, but it's supposedly something very normal and common here. No idea. So the guy had a really hard time clearing out enough that the water will go through and not give me a problem for the meantime. I might have to have my whole backyard dug up and the pipe replaced. Fun times. So in the meantime, I could use everything normally again, and hopefully I don't have another backup, but this is not fun, having to go through that. I'm still not fully moved in yet either. And with all these other extra problems and a lot of these things stalling, it's taking me again away from my actual doing this and reading and enjoying myself. So I just wanted to update everybody on that fun. Things are pushing along though. I'm moving along. I'm getting there. I would just like it to stop having problems for a little bit so that I can get things done, pretty much. And tomorrow we have a storm warning here. Fun. So I wanted to get this book done before the storms roll in, and if I lose power, I don't know. Yet to have bought a generator. This is really nowhere to put it right now. Anywho. The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. Book 1, Part 2. Yay, we made it. We did it. Symbolism and Ideographs. I'm excited for this one. Quote, a symbol is ever to him who has eyes for it, some dimmer or clearer revelation of the godlike. Through all their glimmers, something of a divine idea, nigh the highest in sign that man ever met and embraced under the cross itself, had no meaning save an accidental extrinsic one. End quote. Carlyle. The study of the hidden meaning in every religious and profane legend of whatsoever nation, large or small, preeminently the traditions of the East has occupied the greater portion of the present writer's life. She is one of those who feel convinced that no mythological story, no traditional event in the folklore of a people has ever been at any time pure fiction. And I agree with that. But that every one of such narratives has an actual historical lining to it. In this, the writer disagrees with those symbologists, however, great in their reputation, who find in every myth nothing save additional proofs of the superstitious bent of mind of the ancients, and believe that all mythology sprung from and are built upon solar myths. Such superficial thinkers were admirably disposed of by Mr. Gerald Massey, the poet and the Egyptologist, in a lecture on the lunality, ancient and modern. His pointed criticism is worthy of reproduction in this part of his work, as it echoes so well our own feelings expressed openly so far back as 1875, when Isis Unveiled was written. Quote, sorry guys, this is way smaller than I already blew this up. For 30 years past, Professor Max Mueller has been teaching in his books and lectures in the Times of various magazines from the platform of the Royal Institution, the pulpit of Westminster Abbey, and the chair of Oxford, that mythology is a disease of language, that the ancient symbolism was a result of something like a primitive aberration. Quote, we know, says Runoff, echoing Max Mueller in his Herbert lectures, we know that the mythology is the disease which springs up at a peculiar stage of human culture, since, and in such is the shadow's explanation of a non-evolutionist, and such explanations are still accepted by the British public, that gets its thinking done by proxy. Professor Max Mueller, Cox, Grubernatz, and other profounders of the solar mythos have portrayed the primitive myth maker for us as a sort of Germanized Hindu metaphysician, projecting his own shadow on a mental mist and talking ingenuously concerning smoke, or at least cloud, the sky overhead becoming like the dome of dreamland, scribbled over the imagery of Aboriginal nightmares. They conceive the early man in their own likeness and look upon him as a perversely prone to self-mystification, or as Fortunelli has it, subject to beholding things that are not there. They have misrepresented primitive or archaic man as having been idiotically, sorry guys, misled from the first by an active but untutored imagination into believing all sorts of fallacies, which were directed and constantly contradicted by his own daily experience, a full of fancy in the midst of those grim realities that were grinding his experience into him, like the grinding icebergs making their imprints upon the rocks submerged beneath the sea. It remains to be said, and will one day be acknowledged, that these accepted teachers have been no nearer to the beginnings of mythology and language than Burns' poet Willie had been near to Pegasus. My reply is, 'tis but a dream of the metaphysical theorist that mythology was a disease of language, or of anything else except his own brain. The origin and meaning of mythology have been misplaced altogether by the solarities and weathermongers. Mythology was a primitive mode of thinking, the early thought. It was founded on natural facts and is still verifiable in phenomena. There is nothing insane, nothing irrational in it when considered in the light of evolution and when its mode of expression by sign language is thoroughly understood. The insanity lies in mistaking it for human history or divine revelation. Mythology is the repository of man's most ancient science, and what concerns us chiefly is this: when truly interpreted once more, it is destined to be the death of those false theologies to which it has unwittingly given birth. In modern phraseology, a statement is sometimes said to be mythical in proportion to its being untrue. But the ancient mythology was not a system or mode of falsifying in that sense. Its fables were the means of conveying facts. They were neither forgeries nor fictions. For example, when the Egyptians portrayed the moon as a cat, they were not ignorant enough to suppose that the moon was a cat, nor did their wondering fancies see any likeness in the moon to a cat, nor was a cat myth any mere expansion of verbal metaphor, nor had they any intention of making puzzles or riddles. They had observed the simple fact that the cat saw in the dark, and that her eyes became full orbed and grew most luminous by night. The moon was the seer by night in heaven, and the cat was its equivalent on earth. And so the familiar cat was adopted as a representative, a natural sign, a living pictograph of the lunar orb. And so it followed that the sun saw drawn in the underworld at night could also be called the cat, as it was because it also saw the dark. The name of the cat in Egypt is Manu, which denotes seer from Manu, to see. One writer on mythology asserts that the Egyptians imagined a great cat behind the sun, which is the pupil of the cat's eye. But this imaging is all modern. It is the Muellerite stock in trade. The moon as cat was the eye of the sun, because it reflected the solar light and because the eye gives back the image in its mirror. In the form of the goddess Pasht, the cat keeps watch for the sun with her paw holding down, bruising the head of the serpent of darkness called his eternal enemy. Pretty cool. This is a very correct exposition of the lunar mythos from its astronomical aspect. Sinology, however, is the least esoteric of the divisions of lunar symbology. To master thoroughly, if one is permitted to coin a new word, selenogenesis, one must become proficient in more than its astronomical meaning. The moon is intimately related to the earth, as shown in stanza 6 of book 1. It is more directly concerned with all the mysteries of our globe. I don't like saying that word. Then is even Venus Lucifer, the occult sister and alter ego of Earth. Interesting connection there. The untiring researches of Western and especially German symbologists during the last and present centuries have brought every occultist and most unprejudiced persons to see that without the help of symbology, with its 7 departments of which the moderns know nothing, no ancient scripture can ever be correctly understood. Symbology must be studied from every one of its aspects, from each nation had its own peculiar methods of expression. In short, no Egyptian's papyrus, no Indian tola, no Assyrian tile or Hebrew scroll should be read and accepted literally. Truth. This every scholar now knows. The able lectures of M.G. Massey alone are sufficient in themselves to convince any fair-minded Christian that to accept the dead letter of the Bible is equivalent to falling into a grosser error and superstition than any hereto evolved from the brain of the savage Southeast Sea Islander. But the point to which even the most truth-loving and truth-seeking Orientalists, whether Arianists and Egyptologists, seem to remain blind is the fact that every symbol in papyrus or ola is a many-faced diamond, each of whose facets not merely bears several interpretations, but relates likewise to several sciences. This is instance in the just quoted interpretation of the moon symbolized by the cat, an example of sidereal imagery, the moon bearing many other meanings besides this one and other nations. As a learned Mason and Theosophist, the late Mr. Kenneth Mackenzie has shown in his Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, there is a great difference between emblem and symbol. The former comprises a larger series of thoughts that a symbol, which may be said rather to illustrate some single special idea, hence the symbols say lunar or solar, or several countries, such in each illustrating such a special idea or series of ideas, form a collectively esoteric emblem. The latter is a concrete, visible picture or sign representing principles, or a series of principles recognizable by those who have received certain instructions, initiates. To put it still plainer, the emblem is usually a series of graphic pictures viewed and explained allegorically and unfolding an idea in panoramic views, one after the other. Thus, the Puranas are written emblems. So are the Mosaic and Christian Testaments, or the Bible, and all other exoteric scriptures, as the same authority shows. Quote, all esoteric societies have made use of emblems and symbols, such as the Pythagorean Society, the Eleusinians, the Hermetic Brethren of Egypt, the Rosicrucians, and the Freemasons. Many of these emblems is not proper to divulge to the general eye, and a very minute difference may make the emblem or symbol differ widely in its meaning. The magical sigil, being founded on certain principles of numbers, partake of this character, and although monstrous or ridiculous in the eyes of an uninstructed, convey a whole body of doctrine to those who have been trained to recognize them. End quote. The above enumerated societies are all comparatively modern, none dating back earlier than the Middle Ages. How much more proper than that the students of the oldest archaic school should be careful not to divulge secrets of far more importance to humanity, in the sense of being dangerous in the hands of the latter, than any of the so-called Masonic secrets, which have now become, as the French say, those of the... I don't know how to speak in French, and I don't know how to pronounce this word. And I'm not attempting it. Polichhinelle. And yes, I did take ballet, so I do know a little bit of like French, but not like that. And it's not going to project because my teeth are going to fly out. Just not doing it. But this restriction can apply only to the psychological, or rather psychophysiological and cosmical significance of symbol and emblem, and even to that only partially. An adept must refuse to impart the conditions and means that lead to a correlation of elements, whether psychic or physical, that may produce a hurtful result as well as a beneficent one. But he is ever ready to impart to the earnest student the secret of the ancient thought in anything that regards history concealed under mythological symbolism, and thus to furnish a few more landmarks towards a retrospective view of the past as containing useful information with regard to the origin of man, the evolution of the races, and geognosy. Yeah, that's one of those trippy words. Yeah, it is the crying complaint today, not only among Theosophists, but also among the few profane interested in the subject. Quote, why do not the adepts reveal that which they know? End quote. To this one, my answer, why should they, since one knows beforehand that no man of science will accept, even as a hypothesis, let alone as a theory or axiom, the facts imparted. Have you so much to accept or believe in the ABC of the occult philosophy contained in the Theosophist, esoteric Buddhism, and other works and periodicals? Has not even the little which was given but ridiculed and derided made to face the animal and the ape theory of Huxley and Haeckel on one hand, and the rib of Adam and the apple on the other? Notwithstanding such an unenviable prospect, a mass of factors is given in the present work. And now the origin of man, the evolution of the globe, and the races, human and animal, are as fully treated here as the writer is able to treat them. The proofs brought forward in collaboration of the old teachings are scattered widely throughout the old scriptures of ancient civilizations. The Puranas, the Zenvesta, and the old classics are full of them, but no one has ever gone to the trouble of collecting and collating together those facts. The reasons for this is that such events were recorded symbolically, and that the best scholars, the most acute minds among our Aryanists and Egyptologists, have been too often darkened by one or another preconception, still oftener by one-sided views of the secret meaning. Yet even a parable is a spoken symbol, a fiction or a fable, as some think, an allegorical representation, we say, of life realities, events, and facts. And as a moral was ever drawn from a parable, that moral being an actual truth and fact in human life, so an historical real event was deduced by those versed in heretic science from certain emblems and symbols recorded in the ancient archives of the temples. The religious and esoteric history of every nation was embedded in symbols. It was never expressed in so many works. All the thoughts and emotions, all the learning and knowledge revealed and acquired of the early races found their pictorial expression in allegory and parable. Why? Because the spoken word has a potency unknown to unsuspected, I got it out, and disbelieved in by the modern sages, because sound and rhythm are closely related to the four elements of the ancients, and because such or another vibration in the air is sure to awaken corresponding powers, union with the produces good or bad results, as the case may be. No student was ever allowed to recite historical, religious, or any real events in so many unmistakable words, lest the powers connected with the event should be once more attracted. Such events were narrated only during the initiation, and every student had to record them in corresponding symbols and drawn out of his own mind and examined later by his master before they were finally accepted. This was created in the time of the Chinese alphabet, as before that the heretic symbols were fixed upon the old Egypt. In the Chinese language, the alphabet of which may be read in any language, and which is only a little less ancient than the Egyptian alphabet of Thoth. Every word has a corresponding symbol conveying the word needed in a pictorial form. The language possesses many thousands of such symbols, letters, or logograms, each meaning a whole word, for letters proper or an alphabet do not exist in the Chinese language any more than they did in the Egypt till far later period. The explanation of the chief symbols and emblems is now accepted as Book 2, which treats anthropogenesis, would be most difficult to understand without a preparatory acquaintance with the metaphysical symbols at least. Nor would it be just to enter upon the esoteric reading of symbolism without giving due honor to one who has rendered it the greatest service in this century by discovering the chief key to the ancient Hebrew symbology interwoven strongly with metrology, one of the keys to the one universe mystery language. Mr. Ralston Skinner of Cincinnati, the author of the Hebrew Egyptian mystery and the sources of measures, has our thanks, a mystic and a Kabbalist by nature. He has labored for many years in this direction, and his efforts were certainly crowned with the great successes. In his own words, quote, the writer is quite certain that there was an ancient language which modernly and up to this time appears to have been lost, the vestiges of which, however, abundantly exist. The author discovered that the integral ratio in numbers of diameter to circumference of a circle, geometrical ratio, was the very ancient and probably the divine origin of linear measures. It appears almost proven that the same system of geometry, numbers, ratio, and measures were known and made use of on the continent of North America, even prior to the knowledge of the same by the descending Semites. End quote. Quote, the peculiarity of this language was that it could be contained in another, concealed and not to be perceived, save through the help of special instruction, letters and symbolic signs possessing at the same time the powers or meaning of numbers, of geometrical shapes, pictures, or ideographs, and symbols, the design scope of which would be determinatively helped out by parables in the shape of narratives or parts of narratives, while also it could be set forth separately, independently, and variously by pictures in stone or in earth construction, end quote. Very fascinating. If you really think about the symbols that we see today and everybody picking out these symbols, like, oh, it's evil, it's bad, it's better. But have you looked at the diamond perspective where there's different facets to different things? And if you look at the owl, for example, if you go back to my oracle cards back there, owls mean wisdom and being wise and, you know, a totem animal for passing over and rebirth and death. Doesn't necessarily mean evil, but in other instances, that symbol is symbolized by evil. And oh, the owl is really bad, but owls are really fucking cute. You know, there's a lot of different things in our world that people perceive, and it's like, oh, because they reverted and inverted shit, people are taking the originality of that. It's a perception. It's all it is. It's just perception. It drives me batshit crazy. Quote, to clear up any ambiguity as to the term language, primarily the word means the expression of ideas by human speech, but secondarily, it may mean the expression of ideas by any other instrumentality. This old language is composed in the Hebrew text that by the use of written characters, which will be the language first defined, a distinctly separate series of ideas may be intentionally communicated, other than the ideas expressed by the reading of the sound signs. This secondary language sets forth under a veil series of ideas, copies in imagination of things sensible, which may be pictured, and of things which may be classed as real without being sensible. As for instance, the number 9 may be taken as a reality, though it has no sensible existence, as a revolution of the moon, as separate from the moon itself, by which the revolution has been made, may be taken as given rise to or causing a real idea, though such a revolution has no substance. The idea language may consist of symbols restricted by arbitrary terms and signs, having a very limited range of conceptions and quite valueless, or may it be a reading of nature in some of her manifestations of a value most immeasurable as regards human civilization. Wow. A picture of something natural may give rise to ideas of coordination, subject matter, radiating out in various and even opposing directions, like the spokes of a wheel, and producing natural realities in departments very foreign to the apparent tendency of the reading of the first or starting picture. Notion may give rise to connected notion, but if it does, then however apparently incongruous, all resulting ideas must spring from the original picture and be harmonically connected or related. Thus, with the pictured idea radical enough, the imagination of the cosmos itself, even in its details of construction, might result. Such a use of ordinary language is now obsolete, but it has become a question with the writer whether at one time far back in the past, or it was not the language of the world and of universal use, possessed, however, as it became more and more molded into in its arcane form by a select class or caste. By this I mean that the popular tongue or vernacular commenced even in its origin to be used of as the vehicle of a peculiar mode of conveying ideas. Of this, the evidence are very strong from the causes which, at present, at any rate, we cannot trace or lapse or loss from the original perfect language and perfect system of science. Shall we say perfect because they were of the divine origin and important? Divine origin does not mean here a revelation from an anthropomorphic God on a mount amidst thunder and lightning, but as we understand it, a language and system of science imparted to the early mankind by more advanced mankind, so much higher as to be divine in the sight of the infant humanity, by a mankind, in short, from other spheres, any idea which contains nothing supernatural in it, but the acceptance or rejection of which depends upon the degree of conceit and arrogance in the mind of him to whom it is stated. For if the professors of modern knowledge would only confess that though they know nothing of the future of the disembodied man, or rather will accept nothing of the future, accept nothing, yet this future may be pregnant with surprises and unexpected revelations to them, once their egos are rid of their gross bodies, then materialistic unbelief would have fewer chances than it has. Who of them knows or can tell what may happen when once the life cycle of this globe is run down and our Mother Earth herself falls into her last sleep? who is bold enough to say that the divine egos of our mankind, at least the elect out of the multitudes passing on to other spheres, will not become in their own turn the divine instructors of a new mankind, generated by them as a new globe, called to life and activity by the disembodied principles of our earth. All this may have been the experience of the past, and these strange records lie embedded in the mystery language of the prehistoric ages, the language now called symbolism. Damn! Think about what is happening in our society right now, the giant leap we are all taking consciously. I'm going to be bold because I did a mess up, a boo-boo yesterday. I'm going to read on the mystery language and its keys, and then this last section will end it here. It's juicy. Recent discoveries made by great mathematicians and Kabbalists thus prove, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that every theology from the earliest and oldest down to the latest has sprung not only from a common source of abstract beliefs, but from one universal esoteric or mystery language. These scholars hold the key to the universal language of old and have turned it successfully, though only once, in the hermetically closed door leading to the Hall of Mysteries, the great archaic system known from prehistoric ages as the sacred wisdom science, one that is contained and can be traced in very old as well in every new religion, had and still is its universal language, suspected by the Mason Ragon, the language of the Hierophants, which has 7 dialects, so to speak, each referring and being specifically appropriated to one of the 7 mysteries of nature. Each had its own symbolism. Nature could thus be either read in its fullness or viewed from one of its special aspects. The proof lies of this to this day in the extreme difficulty which the Orientalists in general, the Indianists and Egyptologists especially, experience in interpreting the allegorical writings of the Aryans in the hieratic records of the Old Egypt. This is because they will never remember that all the ancient records were written in a language which was universal and known to all nations alike in days of old, but which is now intelligible only to the few. Like the Arabic figures, which are plain to a man of whatever nation, or like the English word and, which becomes et for Frenchmen, is it et? And und for the German, and so on, yet many be expressed for all civilized nations in the simple sign, the and sign on your keyboard. So all the words of the mystery language signify the same thing to each man of whatever nationality. There have been several men of note who have tried to reestablish such a universal and philosophical tongue. Dulgarmi, Wilkins, Leibniz, but how do you say his name? Fuck. It's a good philosopher too, and I always mispronounce his name, and I'm not gonna detangle it. In his Dimatu, that might be it. Sorry, I'm butchering it. In his Philosophagi, so I'm really, I struggle with languages. Being dyslexic sucks. Being dyslexic and trying to speak another language is like the worst thing in the world. And you can ask my Spanish teacher back in high school. and I butcher Spanish as well. I butcher English. Is the only one who has proven its possibility. The scheme of Valentinus, called the Greek Kabbalah, based on the combination of Greek letters, might serve as a model. The many-sided facets of the mystery language had led to the adoption of widely varied dogmas and rites in the exotericism of the church rituals. It is they, again, which are the origin of most of the dogmas of the Christian church. The 7 sacraments, the Trinity, the resurrection, the 7 capital sins and 7 virtues. The 7 keys to the mystery tongue, however, having always been in the keeping of the highest among the initiated hierophants of antiquity, it is only the partial use of a few out of the 7 which passes through into hands of the new sect of the Nazarenes. Oh, Ashyanadine comes stringing in. Some of the early popes were initiates, but the last fragments of their knowledge have now fallen into the power of the Jesuits, who have now turned them into a system of sorcery. Holy crap! They said it! Sorry, you had to get a little excited there. And the reason being is this is what's being exposed by certain people. My friend, all the documents. Yeah, it's true. Very, very true. Council of Nicaea. Just saying. Just saying. It is maintained that India, not in its present limits, but including its ancient boundaries, is the only country in the world which still has among her sons adepts who have the knowledge of all the 7 subsystems and the key to the entire system. Since the fall of Memphis, Egypt, began to lose those keys one by one, and Chaldea had preserved only 3 in the days of Bersus. I can never say his name. As for the Hebrews in all their writings, they show no more than a thorough knowledge of the astronomical, geometrical, and numerical systems of symbolizing all the human and especially the physiological functions. They never had the higher keys. This is heavy shit. Every time I hear people talking of the religion of Egypt, writes M. Gaston Maspero, the great French Egyptologist and the successor of Mariette Bey, I am tempted to ask which of the Egyptian religions they are talking about. Is it of the Egyptian religion of the 4th dynasty or of the Egyptian religion of the Ptolemaic period? Is it of the religious of the rabble or of that of the learned men? Of that which was taught in the schools of Heliopolis, or of that other which was in the minds and conceptions of the Theban sacerdotal class? For between the first tomb of Memphis, which bears the cartouche of a king of the 3rd dynasty, and the last stones of Esni under Caesar Philippus and the Arabian, there is an interval of at least 5,000 years. Leaving aside the invasion of the shepherds and the Ethiopian and the Assyrian dominions, the Persian conquest, Greek colonization, and 1,000 revolutions of its political life, Egypt has passed during those 5,000 years through many vicissitudes of life, moral and intellectual. In chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead, which seems to contain the exposition of the system of the world as it was understood at Heliopolis, during the time of the first dynasties, it is known to us only by a few copies of the 11th and 12th dynasties. Each of the verses composing it was already at the time interpreted in 3 or 4 different ways, so different indeed that according to this other school, the demiurge became the solar fire Ra, Shu, or the primordial water. 15 centuries later, the number of ratings had increased considerably. Time had in its course modified the ideas about the universe and the forces that ruled it. During the hardly 18th centuries that Christianity existed, it was work developed and transformed most of the dogmas. How many times then might not the Egyptian clergy had altered its dogmas during those 50 centuries that separated Theodonos from the king builders of the pyramids? Here we believe the eminent Egyptologist is going too far. The esoteric dogmas may often have been altered, the esoteric never. He does not take into account the sacred immutability of the primitive truths revealed only during the mysteries of initiation. The Egyptian priests have forgotten much. They altered nothing. The loss of a good idea of the primitive teaching was due to the sudden deaths of the great hierophants, who passed away before they had time to reveal all their successors, mostly to the absence of worthy heirs to the knowledge. Yet they have preserved in their rituals and dogmas the principal teachings of the secret doctrine. Thus, in the 17th chapter mentioned by Maspero, one finds Osiris saying he is Tum, the creative force in nature giving form to all beings, spirits and men, self-generated and self-existent, issued from noun, the celestial river, called Father Mother of the gods, the primordial deity, which is chaos, or the deep, impregnated by the unseen spirit. 2, he has found Shu, solar force, or the staircase in the city of the 8, the 2 cubes of good and evil, and he has annihilated the evil principles in noun, chaos, the child of rebellion. 3, he is the fire and water, noun, the primordial parent, and he created the gods out of his limbs. 14 gods, twice 7. 7 dark and 7 light gods, and the 7 spirits of the present of the Christians, and the 7 dark evil spirits. 4, he is the law of existence and being, the Beno, the phoenix, the bird of resurrection in eternity, in the whom night follows the day and the day the night, an allusion to the periodical cycles of cosmic resurrection and human reincarnation. For what can this mean? The wayfarer who crosses millions of years in the name of one, and the great green primordial water of chaos, the name of the other, one begetting millions of years in succession, the other engulfing them to restore them back. 5, he speaks of the 7 luminous ones who follow their Lord, who confers justice, Osiris and Amenti. All this now shown to have been the source and origin of Christian dogmas, that which the Jews had from Egypt through Moses and other initiates was confused and distorted enough in later days, and that which the church got from both is still more misinterpreted. Yet their systems is now proven identical in this special department of symbology, the key namely to the mysteries of astronomy as connected with those of generation and conception, with those ideas of ancient religions and theology of which has developed the phallic element. The Jewish system of sacred measures applied to religious symbols is the same so far as geometrical and numerical combinations go as those of Chaldea, Greece, and Egypt, having been adopted by the Jews during the centuries of their slavery and captivity with those nations. What was that system? It is the intimate conviction of the author of the source of measures that the Mosaic books, were intended by a mode of art speech to set forth a geometrical and numerical system of exact science, which should serve as an origin of measures. Piazzi Smith believes likewise. The system and the measures are found by some scholars to be identical with those used in the construction of Great Pyramid, but this is only partially so. The foundation of these measures were the Parker ratio, says Mr. R. Skinner in The Source of Measures. The author of this very extraordinary work had found it out, he says, in the use of the integral ratio in numbers of diameter to circumference of a circle discovered by John Parker of New York. This ratio is 6,561 for diameter and 20,612 for circumference. Furthermore, this geometrical ratio was very ancient and probably the divine origin of what have now become through exoteric handling and practical application the British linear measures, the underlying unit of which the inch was likewise the base of one of the Royal Egyptian cubits and of the Roman foot. He also found out that there was a modified form of the ratio. And while this last ratio pointed through the origin of the exact integral pi, or to 6,561 to 20,612, it also served as a base for astronomical calculations. The author discovered the system of exact science, geometrical and numerical and astronomical, founded on these ratios and to be found in use in the construction of the Great Pyramid, Egyptian pyramid, which was in part the burden of this language as contained in and concealed under the verbiage of the Hebrew text of the Bible. The inch and the 2-foot rule of 24 inches interpreted for use through the elements of the circle. And the ratios mentioned were found to be at the basis or foundation of the natural and Egyptian and Hebrew system of science, while, moreover, it seems evident enough that the system itself was looked upon as divine origin and divine revelation. But let us see what is said by the opponents of Professor Piazzi Smith's measurements of the pyramid. Mr. Pittry seems to deny them and have to make short work altogether of Piazzi Smith's calculations and their biblical connection. So does Mr. Proctor, the champion coincidentalist. Another word I can't project. For many years past, in every question of ancient arts and sciences, speaking of the multitude of relations independent of the pyramid, which have turned up while the pyramidalists have been endeavoring to connect the pyramid with the solar system. These coincidences, he says, are altogether more curious than any coincidence between the pyramid and astronomical numbers. The former are the close and remarkable as they are real, those coincidences that would remain if even the pyramid had no existence. The latter, which are only imaginary, have only been established by the process which schoolboys call fudging, and now new measures have left the work to be done all over again. To this, Mr. Stanley Wake justly observes in his work on the origin of significance of the Great Pyramid, London, 1882, they must, however, have been more than mere coincidences if the builders of the pyramid had astronomical knowledge displayed in its perfect orientation and its other omitted astronomical features. They had it, and it is on this knowledge that the program of the mysteries and of the series of initiations were based. Thence, the construction of the pyramids and the everlasting record and indestructible symbol of these mysteries and initiations on earth, as courses of the stars are in heaven. The cycle of initiation was reproduced in miniature of the great series of cosmic changes which astronomers have given the name tropical or sidereal year, just as the close of the cycle of the sidereal year, 25,868, holy crap, years, the heavenly bodies return to the same relative positions as they occupied at its outset. So at the close of the cycle of initiation, the inner man has regained the pristine state of divine purity and knowledge from which he set out on this cycle of terrestrial incarnation. Why I just made that holy crap statement? My soul has lived 28,868 years. All the incarnations. That's how many times. That's a lot. In form. In a form. In materiality. Moses, an initiate into the Egyptian misogyny, based the religious mysteries of the new nation which he created upon the same abstract formulae derived from this sidereal cycle, which he symbolized under the form and measurements of the tabernacle that he is supposed to have constructed in the wilderness. On this data, the latter Jewish high priests constructed the allegory of Solomon's temple, a building which never had real existence, any more than King Solomon himself, who is simply in such a solar myth as is the still later Harem Abif of the Masons, as Ragan has well demonstrated. Thus, it is the measurements of this allegorical temple, the symbol of the cycle of initiation, coincide with those of the Great Pyramid, is the due to the fact that the former were derived from the latter through the tabernacle of Moses. That our author has undeniably discovered one and even two of the keys is fully demonstrated in the work just quoted. One has but to read it to feel a growing conviction that the hidden meaning of the allegories and parables of both Testament is now unveiled, but that he owes this discovery more to his own genius than to Parker and Piazzi Smith is as certain, if not more so. For as just shown, whether the measure of the Great Pyramid taken and adopted as the correct ones by the biblical pyramidalists are beyond suspicion is not so sure. A proof of this work, called The Pyramids and Temples of Giza by Mr. F. Petrie, besides other works written quite recently to oppose such calculations, which were called biased. We gather that nearly every one of Piazzi Smith's measurements differs from the latter and more carefully made measurements of Mr. Petrie, who concluded the introduction to his work with the sentence, quote, as to the results of the whole investigation, perhaps many theories will agree with an American who was a warm believer in the pyramid theories. Then he came to Giza. I had the pleasure of his company there for a couple of days, and at our last meal together, he said to me in a saddened tone, well, sir, I feel as if I had been to a funeral. By all means, let the old theories have a decent burial, though we should take care in our haste none of the wounded ones are buried alive. End quote. As regard the late J. Parker's calculation in general and his third proposition especially, we have consulted some eminent mathematicians, and this is substance of what they say. Parker's reasoning rests in sentimental rather than mathematical consideration and logically inconclusive. Proposition 3, namely that the circle is the natural basis or beginning of all area, and the square being made so in mathematical science is artificial and arbitrary, is an illustration of an arbitrary position and cannot safely be relied upon in mathematical reasoning. The same observance applies even more strongly in Proposition 7, which states that, quote, because the circle is the primary shape in nature, and hence the basis of area, and because the circle is measured by and is equal to the square only in ratio of half its circumference by the radius, therefore circumference and radius and not the square of diameter are the only natural and legitimate elements of area by which all regular shapes are made equal to the square and equal to the circle. In Proposition 9, it is a remarkable example of faculty reasoning, and it is the one of which Mr. Parker's quadrature mainly rests. Here it is. Quote, the circle and the equilateral triangle are opposite to the one another in all the elements of their construction. Hence, the fractional diameter of one circle, which is equal to the diameter of one square, is the opposite duplicate ratio to the diameter in equilateral triangle, whose area is 1. Granting for the sake of argument that a triangle can be said to have a radius in the sense in which we speak of the radius of a circle, for what Parker calls the radius of the triangle is the radius of a circle inscribed in the triangle, and therefore not the radius of the triangle at all, and granting for the moment that the other fanciful and mathematical propositions united in his premise, why we must conclude that if the triangle and circle are opposite in all the elements of their construction, the diameter of any defined circle in its opposite duplicate ratio of the diameter of any given equivalent triangle. What necessary connection is there between the premise and conclusion? The reasoning is of kind not known in geometry and would not be accepted by strict mathematicians. Whether the archaic esoteric system originated the British inch or not is of little consequence, however, in the strict and true metaphysician, nor does Mr. Rattlesnake Skinner's esoteric reading of the Bible become innocent merely because the measure of the pyramid will not be found to agree with those of Solomon's temple, the Ark of Noah, or because Mr. Parker's quadrature, the circle, is rejected by mathematicians. For Mr. Skinner's reading depends upon, first, all of the Kabbalistic methods and rabbinical value of the Hebrew letters. But it is extremely important to ascertain whether the measures used in the evolution and building of the Aryan symbolic religion, in the construction of their temples, the figures given in the Puranas, and especially in their chronology, their astronomical symbols and duration of cycles, and their computations were or were not the same as those used in the biblical measurements and glyphs. For this will prove that the Jews, useless, they took their sacred cubit and measurements from the Egyptians. Moses, being an initiate of the priests, must have got those notions from India. At any rate, they passed them to the early Christians. Hence, it is the occultists and Kabbalists who are the true heirs to the knowledge or the secret wisdom which is still found in the Bible, for they alone now understand the real meaning, whereas profound Jews and Christians clinging to the husks and dead letter thereof. That is to say, the system of measures which lead the invention of the God names Elohim and Jehovah, and their adaptation to phallicism, and that Jehovah is not very flattered copy of Osiris is now demonstrated by the author and source of Measures, but the latter and Mr. Piazza Smith both seem to labor under the impression that A, the priority of the system belongs to the Israelites, the Hebrew language being the divine language, and that B, the universal language belongs to the direct revelation. The latter hypothesis is correct only in the sense shown in the last paragraph of the proceeding, but we have to agree as to the nature and character of the divine revealer. With regard to the priority, this is to the profane, will of course depend upon A, the internal and external evidence of the revelation, and B, on each scholar and individual preconception. This, however, cannot prevent either the theistic Kabbalists or the pantheistic occultists from believing each in his way, neither of the two convincing the other. The data furnished by history are too mere and unsatisfactory for either of them to prove the septic which of them is right. On the other hand, the proofs afforded by tradition are too constantly rejected for us to hope to settle the question in our present age. Meanwhile, materialistic science will be laughing impartially at both Kabbalists and occultists. But the said vexed question of priority once laid aside, science in its departments of philology and comparative religion will find itself finally taken to task and to be compelled to admit the common claim. Its greatest scholars, instead of poo-pooing that supposed farrago of absurd fiction and superstitions, as the Brahminical literature is generally termed, will endeavor to learn the symbolical universal language within its numerical and geometrical keys. But here again, they will hardly be successful if they share the belief that the Jewish Kabbalistic system contains the key to the whole mystery, for it does not, nor does any other scripture at present possess in its entirety, for even the Vedas are not complete. Every old religion is but a chapter or two of the entire volume of archaic primeval mysteries, Eastern occultism alone being able to boast that in its possession of full secret with the 7 keys. Comparisons will be instituted, and as much as possible will be explained in this work. The rest is left to the student's personal intuition. For in saying that the Eastern occultists have the secret is not as if a complete or even an approximate knowledge was claimed by the writer, which would be absurd. What I know, I give out, but that which I cannot explain, the student must find out for himself. But while supposing that the whole cycle of the universe mystery language will not be mastered for whole centuries to come, even that which has been discovered in the Bible by some scholars quite sufficient to demonstrate the claim mathematically, Judaism having availed itself of 2 keys out of the 7, and those 2 keys having been now rediscovered, it becomes no longer a matter of individual speculation and hypothesis, least of all of coincidence, but one of correct reading of the Bible text, as anyone acquainted with the arithmetic reads and varies on additions or total. A few years longer and this system will kill the dead letter of the Bible, as it will that of all other esoteric faiths, by showing the dogmas of their real naked meaning. And this undeniable meaning, however incomplete, will unveil the mystery of being. Besides changing entirely the modern scientific systems of anthropology, ontology, and especially that of chronology, the elements of phallicism found in every God name and narrative in the Old, and to some degree in the New Testament, may also in time considerably change modern materialistic views of biology and physiology. Divested of their modern repulsive crudeness, Such views of nature and man on the authority of celestial bodies and their mysteries will unveil the evolutions of human mind and show how natural was such a course of thought. The so-called phallic symbols have become offensive only because of the element of materiality and animality in them, as they originated with the archaic races, which, issuing their personal knowledge from androgyny ancestry, were the first phenomenal manifestations in their own sight of separation of sexes and ensuring mystery of creating their own turn. Such symbols were but natural. If later races have degraded them, especially the chosen people, this does not affect the origin of those symbols. The little Semitic tribe, one of the smallest branchlets from the commingling of the fourth and fifth subraces, the Mongolo-Turanian and the Indo-European, so called after sinking the great continent, could only accept its symbology in the spirit with which it was given by the nation from which it was derived. Perchance in the Mosaic beginnings, the symbology was not as crude as it became later under the handling of Ezra, who remodeled the whole Pentateuch. I can't get that name out. For the glyph of Pharaoh's daughter, the woman, the Nile, the great deep in water, and the baby boy found floating therein, in the ark of rushes, has not been primarily composed for or by Moses. It has been found anticipated in the Babylonian fragments on its tiles in the story of King Sargon, who lived far earlier than Moses. Now, what is a logical inference? Most assuredly that which gives us the right to say that the story told by Moses by Ezra has been learned by him while in Babylon, and that he applied the allegory told of Sargon to the Jewish lawgiver. In short, the Exodus was never written by Moses, but refabricated from old materials by Ezra. Let's say that probably is true. And if so, then why would not other symbols and glyphs, far more crude in their phallic element, have been added to this adept in the later Chaldean and Sabaean phallic worship? We are taught that the primeval faith of the Israelites were quite different from that which was developed centuries later by the Talmudists, and before them by David and Hezekiah. All this, notwithstanding the exoteric element, as now found in the two testaments, is quite sufficient to the class the Bible among esoteric works, and to the connect to its secret system with India, Chaldea, and Egyptian symbolism. The whole cycle of biblical glyphs and numbers are suggested by astronomical observations. Astronomy and theology, being closely connected, is found in Indian esoteric as well as exoteric systems. These figures and their symbols, the signs of the zodiac, the planets, their aspects and nodes, the last term having now passed even into our modern botany to distinguish male and female plants, the unisexual, polygamous, I can't even read those words, are known in astronomy as sextiles, quintiles, and so on, have been used for ages and meaning as Hebrew numerals. The earliest forms of elementary geometry must have certainly been suggested by observation of the heavenly bodies and their groupings. Hence, the most archaic symbols in Eastern esotericism are a circle, a point, a triangle, a plane, a cube, a pentacle, and a hexagon, and plane figures with various sides and angles. This shows the knowledge and use of geometrical symbology to be used as the old world. Starting from this, it becomes easy to understand how nature herself could have taught primeval mankind, even without the help of its divine instructors, the first principles of numerical and geometrical symbolic language. Hence, one finds numbers and figures used as an expression and a record of thought in every archaic symbolical scripture. They are even the same, with only certain variations growing out of the first figures. Thus, the evolution and correlation of the mysteries of cosmos, of its growth and development, spiritual and physical, abstract and concrete, were first recorded in geometrical changes of shape. Every cosmogony began with a circle, a point, a triangle, a cube, up to a number 9, when it was synthesized by the first line in circle, that the Pythagorean mystic decade, the sum of all, involving in expressing the mysteries of the entire cosmos, recorded 100 times more fully in the Hindu system for him who can understand its mystic language. The numbers 3 and 4 in their blending of 7, as those of 5, 6, 9, and 10, are the very cornerstone of the occult cosmogonies. This decade and its 1,000 combinations are found in every portion of the globe. One recognizes them as the caves and rock-cut temples of Hinduistan and Central Asia, as the pyramids in Egypt of America, and in the catacombs of Asmanidads, in the mounds of the Caucasian snow-capped fastness, in the ruins of Planique in Easter Island, everywhere whither the foot of ancient man has ever journeyed. The 3 and the 4, the triangle and the cube, or the male and female universal glyph, showing the first aspect of the evolving deity, is the stamp for even in the Southern Cross in the heavens, as the Egyptians' crux anasta, as well expressed as a cube unfolded in its display across of the Tau, or Egyptian form of the Christian cross form. A circle attached to the first gives the Unistag cross. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Numbers 3 and 4 are counted on the cross, showing the form of the Hebrew golden candlestick in the Holy of Holies. And of the 3 plus 4 equals 7, and 6 plus 1 equals 7 days in the circle of the week, as 7 lights of the sun. So also the week of 7 lights give origin to the 7th month and year. So it is the time maker of birth. The cross form being shown then by the connected use of the form 113:355. The symbol is completed by the attachment of man to the cross. The kind of measure was made to coordinate with the idea of origin of human life, and hence the phallic form. The stanzas show the cross and these numbers playing a prominent part in the archaic cosmogony. Meanwhile, we may profit from the evidence collected by the same author to show the identity of symbols and their esoteric meaning all over the globe, which he calls rightly the primordial vestiges of the symbols. Quote, under the general view taken of nature and the number forms, it becomes a matter of research of the utmost interest as to when and where their existence and their use first became known. Has it been a matter of revelation in what we know as the historic age, a cycle exceedingly modern when the age of human race is contemplated? It seems, in fact, as to the date of its possession by man, to have been further removed in the past form the old Egyptian that are the old Egyptians from us. The Easter Isles in the mid-Pacific, present feature of the remaining peaks of the mountains of a submerged continent, for the reason that these peaks are thickly studded with cyclopean statues, remnants of the civilization of a dense and cultivated people, who must have had a necessity occupied a widely extended area. On the back of these images to be found the anisette cross, and the same modified to the outlines of a human form. A full description with the same modified to the outlines of a human form. Sorry, guys, I'm repeating. A full description with the plate showing the land with the thickly planted statues also was copied of the images to be found in the January number 1870 of the London Builder. In The Naturalist, published at Salem, Massachusetts, in one of the early numbers is to be found a description of some very ancient and various carvings on the crest walls of the mountains of South America. Older by far, it is averred, exhibited the outlines of a man stretched out on a cross. By the series of drawings by which from the form of a man that of a cross springs, but so done that the cross may be taken as man or as man as the cross, thus exhibiting a symbolic display of interdependency of the form set forth. Things humming is trying to hack into my computer. Just putting that out there as a timestamp, because Siri was trying to listen to me. Good advice, whoever's trying to listen to me. Sorry. Not sorry. Fucking demonics. In The Naturalist, published at Salem, Massachusetts, in one of the early numbers, is to be found a description of some very ancient and curious carvings. Did I read that already? To be found described of some very ancient and curious carvings of the crests of the mountains. Yes, I did. It is known that the tradition among the Aztecs have been handed down a very perfect account of the deluge. Baron Humboldt says that we are to look for the country of Aztlan, the original country of the Aztecs, as high up at least as the 42nd parallel north, whence journeying they at the last arrived in the Vale of Mexico. In the vale, the earthen mounds of the far north become the elegant stone pyramidal and other structures whose remains are now found. The correspondence between the Aztecs remains those of the Egyptians are known. Atwater, for examination of hundreds of them, is convinced that they had a knowledge of astronomy. As to one of the most perfect of the pyramid structures among the Aztecs, Humboldt gives a description of the following effect. The form of this pyramid of Papatana, which has 7 stories, is more tapering than any other monument of this kind yet discovered, but its height is not remarkable, being but 57 feet, its base but 25 feet on each side. However, it is remarkable on one account. It is built entirely of hewn stones of an extraordinary size and very beautifully shaped. 3 staircases lead to the top, the steps of which are decorated with hieroglyphic sculptures, and small niches arranged with great symmetry. The number of these niches seem to allude to 318 simple and compound signs of the days of the civil calendar. 318 is the Gnostic value of Christ, remarks the author, in the famous number of trained or circumcised servants of Abraham. When it is considered that 318 is the abstract value and universal, as expressive of the diameter value of circumference of unity, it is used in the composition of civil calendar, becomes manifest. Identical glyphs, numbers, and esoteric symbols are found in Egypt, Peru, Mexico, Easter Island, India, Chaldea, and Central America, and Central Asia, Crucified men and symbols of the evolution of races from God, and yet behold science repudiating the idea of human race other than one made in our image. Theology clinging to its 6,000 years of creation, anthropology teaching in our descent from the ape, and the clergy tracing it from Adam 4,004 years BC. Shall one of the fear of incurring penalty of being called superstitious fool and even a liar ascertain from furnishing proofs as good as any, only because the day when all the seven keys shall be delivered unto science, or rather that men learning and research in the symbolical department has not yet dawned. In the face of crushing discoveries of geology, anthropology, whatever, I'm kind of like, with regard to the antiquity of man, shall we, in order to avoid the usual penalty that awaits everyone who strays outside the beaten path of either theology or materialism, hold that 6,000 years of special creation, or accept in submission admiration of our genealogy and descent from the ape? Not so, as long as it is known that the secret records hold that seven keys to the mysteries of the genesis of man, faculty, materialistic, and biased as the scientific theories may be, they are 1,000 times nearer the truth than the vagaries of theology. The later are in their death agony for everyone but the most uncompromising bigot and fanatic. Hence, we have no choice but either to blindly accept the deductions of science or to cut adrift from it and withstand it fearlessly to its face, stating that the secret doctrine teaches us being fully prepared to bear the consequences. But let us see whether science in its materialistic speculations and even theology in its death rattle and supreme struggle to reconcile the 6,000 years since Adam with Sir Charles Lyell's geological evidences of antiquity of man do not themselves give us unconsciously a helping hand. Ethnology, on the confession of some of its very learned votaries, finds it already impossible to account for the varieties in the human races unless the hypothesis of the creation of several atoms be accepted. They speak of the white atom and the black atom, a red atom and a yellow atom. Were they Hindus enumerating the rebirths of Vamadva from the Linga Purana, they could say little more. For enumerating the represented births of Siva, the later show him in one kapla of a white complexion, in another a black color, in still another of a red color, after which the Kumara becomes 4 youths of yellow color. This strange coincidence, as Mr. Proctor would say, speak only in favor of the scientific intuition of Silva Kumara, represents only allegorically human races during the genesis of man, but it led to another intuitional phenomenon, and the theory ranks this time. The unknown author of Primeval Man is a desperate effort to screen the divine revelation from the merciless and eloquent discoveries of genealogy and anthropology, remarking that it would be unfortunate if the defenders of the Bible would be driven into the position of either surrendering the inspiration of Scripture or denying the conclusions of geologists, finds a compromise. Nigh, he devotes a thick volume to proving this fact. Adam was not the first man created upon the earth. The exhumed relics of pre-Adamic man, instead of shaking our confidence in Scripture, supply additional proof of its veracity. How so? In the simplest way imagined. For the author argues that henceforth we, the clergy, are enabled to leave scientific men to pursue their studies without attempting to coerce them by fear of heresy. The Bible narrative does not commence with creation as is commonly supposed, but the formation of Adam and Eve millions of years after our planet has been created. Its previous history, so far as scripture is concerned, is yet unwritten. There may have been not one, but 20 different races upon the earth before the time of Adam, just as there may be 20 different races of men on other worlds. Who then or what were those races, since author still maintains that Adam is the first man or of our race? Since the author, it was the satanic race and races. I'm going to read that again. Supposedly, we are composed of 22 different races of alien DNA. There may have not been one, but 20 different races upon the earth before the time of Adam, just as they may be 20 different races of men on other worlds. Who then or what were those races? Since the author still maintains that Adam is the first man of our race, it was the satanic race and races. Satan was never in heaven, angels and men being one species. I concur with that. It was the pre-Adamic race of the angels that sinned. Satan was the first prince of this world, we read. Having died in the consequence of his rebellion, he remained on earth as a disembodied spirit and tempted Adam and Eve. The earlier ages of the satanic race, and more especially during the lifetime of Satan, may have been a period of patriarchal civilization and comparative repose of time of Tubal, Cains, and Jubals, when both scientists and arts attempted to strike their roots into the accused ground. What a subject for an epic, when there are inevitable incidences which must have occurred. We see before us the gay primitive lover wooing his blushing bride at the dew eve under the Danish oaks, and that grew where no other oaks would grow. The gray primeval patriarch, the primeval offspring, innocently gamboling by his side. 1,000 such pictures arise before us. The retrospective glance at the satanic blushing bride in the days of Satan's innocence does not lose in poetry as it gains in originality. Quite the reverse. The modern Christian bride, who does not often blush nowadays before her gay modern lovers, might even derive a moral lesson from this daughter of Satan in the exuberant fancy of her first human biographer. These pictures, and to appreciate them at their true value, they must be examined in the volume that describes them. All are suggested by the view to reconcile the infallibility of revealed scripture with Sir C. Lyell's Antiquity of Man and other damaging scientific works, but does not pervert truth and fact appearing at the foundation of the vagaries which the author has never dared to sign with his own or even borrowed name. For his pre-Adamic race is not satanic, but simply Atlantic, and the hermaphroditics before the latter are mentioned in the Bible when read esoterically, as they are in the Secret Doctrine. The 7 keys open the mysteries, past and present, future, and the 7 great root races as of the 7 Kappalas. Though the genesis of man and even the esoteric genealogy will surely be rejected by science just as much as the satanic and pre-Adamic races, Yet if having no, sorry guys, no other way out of their difficulties, the scientists have to choose between the two. We feel certain scripture, notwithstanding, once the mystery language is approximately mastered, is the archaic teaching that will be accepted. And as my voice is slowly going, we have ended. This is very divine timing. This is divine timing. Divine timing. Insane how this all works. But I hope you enjoyed that. Very long, very, very long read. Again, I'm sorry for the mispronunciations, misprojections of names and other sorts. I am but human, trapped in a human form. And if anything, a lot of these books are just validating what I am and what most of you are as well. So with that, please don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And if you would like to help me continue doing this work, all the links will be linked down below. A love donation is very warm and fuzzy and thankful, as I am still in the middle of chaos and more destruction, and moving is a nightmare. And it sucks. So, sending each and every one of you love, light, and protection, because we need it nowadays more than ever. Keep your vibes high. Discern. Go within. And I'll see you on the next one, guys. Bye.